What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Andre with 6 Speed Media, and today I'm going to explain to you how I edit a photo. So as you can see on the screen here, this is my 2006 Subaru Outback, and went ahead and took a little photo shoot with it just kind of for this purpose to explain a little bit about how I edit, how I take a picture. A lot of it depends on location. You want good lighting, and a nice camera also helps. But you can do this with pretty much any DSLR, whatever you have. First things first, you want to make sure that you're shooting in RAW. Now you can shoot in JPEG, but to get the most out of the picture in post, you want to make sure that you are using RAW. That's going to help you with bringing the shadows out, doing all types of things. As you can see here, this is before and after, and I'm going to show you how we got there. So let's start out. As you can see in the picture, exposure was a little high, so I decided to lower that down a bit. Sometimes it depends on the lighting, like I said, and that'll be able to tell you if you should adjust exposure or not. A lot of times you don't need to, and that's okay. So after exposure, we went ahead and brought down all the highlights, lowered it just a little bit more, get rid of all the little glares and stuff like that. Just bring down overall brightness, and then we brought out the shadows. So you could see after you adjust the highlights and all that. Here's what we have before. Bringing down highlights, you could see along the reverse and turn signals, the turn signals. You can see how dark they are versus the highlights were all the way up, or highlights were at 0. Then you can see it's a little overexposed there. So without exposing the whole picture, we bring down the highlights so it gets rid of those bright points. Then we'll lift up the shadows, and as you can see, we brought out a lot of what's going on back here, all the little details. And, the car's not in the best condition, so I did have to do some editing to get little scratches out, but this is just for training purposes. So as you can see with shadows, bring it up, bring it down, brings out a lot of detail. Again, using RAW really helps with this. JPEG, you won't get a lot of detail out of it, so this is really good for it. Then I went ahead and lowered the blacks just a tad, because it wasn't really, I just wanted a little bit more of the deep black. You can go a lot more, but then again, you're going to be darkening the whole image, so you really don't want to do too much unless the picture calls for it. So it depends on the composition and all that. Afterwards, you see our temperature range is at 6200. Increase the tint a little bit, just for little minor colors, and desaturated. I wanted to give this picture more of a moody look, so I went ahead and desaturated it, because as you can see, when you have 0 saturation, you get a lot of color. And nothing wrong with color, but I wanted it, like I said, a little darker, so I brought it down a little bit, got rid of some of the color, and right about there. And that way we have this nice gloomy effect. We did have a lot of clouds, so that's kind of what the vibe I wanted to go for with this photo. Then I brought down the teals and the greens. So a lot of the teals is what you'll see in the windshield and stuff like that. This wasn't so much. It did affect the license plate a little, but I'm not too concerned. I could bring that back out as well. But the greens also kind of wanted to get rid of them, just because you can see in this window here. If we go ahead and zoom in, you'll see we have that green tint, just like that. So bring it down, gets rid of that. So a lot of the windows you'll see in like the windshield and stuff like that, you'll really see that green teal color, and I personally like to get rid of it. After that, also forgot to mention this, when you do before you do start editing your photo, make sure it's straight. You can do the auto align, and that works pretty well, but at the same time, you may not, as you can see with the lines here, it may not capture it correctly, so you're going to have to go in, make sure you're lined up nice and straight. So after I did all that, I went ahead and took out the imperfections that I found. A lot of them were in this rear bumper specifically. So as you can see, a couple little small dings and paint chips here and there. Got rid of those, so you don't really see them anymore. Now I can go through this whole thing, but honestly it wasn't really worth me spending that much time. But that's just an idea that you can do. You can go in there, get rid of some of this stuff that's hanging out, and it disappears. So it's good to take out little imperfections, especially with cars if you have on like the front bumper where there's like paint chips from rocks and stuff like that, or small dents. It just gives it a nice, smoother look, a lot cleaner. So after I do that, went ahead with the brush tool. I adjusted the taillights. What I did with the taillights is I brought the contrast up, exposure down, a little bit of clarity. That's pretty much it. So you can saturate them a little bit, but for the effect of the picture, I wanted to keep it down. And you can see the highlighted areas, on both taillights. Just go ahead and color them in. And I like to make them a little darker too, so I added a little bit of black, so you can see how it just a tad, it'll adjust and just matches the rest of the picture. A little bit of clarity, and you're good with the lights. So next thing I like to do with a lot of the pictures is use graduated filters. As you can see here, I did bring down some of the exposure to attract attention to the center of the photo. So when you have a car especially, you really want to make sure that the car is the center of attention. You want the car to really stand out from the background. So sometimes you can get away with a little bit brighter, here and there, but a lot of what I like to do is darken out the outsides just a little bit. You don't have to, go too crazy with it or, make them black completely. But I like to use the graduated filter so it gives a nice graduated shade. So after I did that with the ground, I went ahead and did the circular filter around the car. So this filter specifically, I inverted it, and that way you get the rest of the background. So here's where we were at, and we brought it all the way down. Well, not all the way, but all the way down. This one specifically went to -1.2, and that brought down the corners and all around it overall, leaving the center a little bit brighter. So for me, that wasn't really enough in the center, so I duplicated it. And you can go ahead and do that too by right-clicking, hit duplicate, and then after you duplicate it, you would hit invert to make sure that you're only affecting inside the circle. So after that, I decreased the brightness just a little to match the rest, but as you can see, the car still stands out from the background. You want to make sure that the subject is seen in the photo. So after that, we went ahead and adjusted the sharpening. Made it a little bit sharper. I don't like to go too crazy with sharpness. I just like a nice little... I brought this one up to 70. Masking, if you didn't know, you can hold the Alt button on Windows, and it'll give you this screen. And you can adjust where it really affects the sharpening. So I brought it all the way down so you could see that it affects a lot of like the lights and the edges of the car, a little bit around the background and the wheels, just to really make those lines nice and crisp. And then after you're done, I like to do a little bit of noise reduction. So if you don't know what noise reduction is, it's really going to smooth out, get rid of the grain and stuff like that. You don't want to do too crazy because, I'll show you, it kind of doesn't really look that natural in certain pictures. This one actually isn't terrible. But if I bring this all the way versus down, you can really see the difference. All the way. You can see it's kind of blurred out here and there. It doesn't really have the sharpness anymore. So I like to do around 20 to 25 for the cars. It's just enough to really bring out the smoothness, so it doesn't look like all this. The car is a little dirty and wet, so it's kind of nice to get rid of some of those spots and clean up the edges. Get rid of the grain mainly. So you don't want any of the grain in the picture unless that's what you're going for. After that, I like to do the remove the chromatic aberration, and what that is especially along the edges when you really get rid of the highlights. They probably won't show it now because it's already gone with the other colors that I brought out. But a lot of times you'll see on the edges where you'll have like this green tint or purple tint. A lot of it's on like lights and stuff. You really want to be careful because it doesn't really look that good. So I like to make sure that you don't really see the edges that are a little purple. It's just what happens when you edit the picture and you get rid of the highlights. That's pretty much what I do when I edit a photo. A lot of it depends on the picture, and like I said, depends on the picture, depends on where I'm at, what I need to do. Sometimes it's very minimal editing, just my kind of style. A lot of people do, really heavy edits, and I should have used a circular polarizer to get rid of some of these reflections. I didn't have one at the time that I was taking this photo, so that's why you see the reflections. But you can go ahead and Photoshop, and sometimes, you'll be able to get rid of some of this. But in this case, I did not. So yeah, that's what I do to edit a photo. Stay tuned. I'll be posting a little bit more pictures and videos on my Instagram and here on YouTube to explain how I edit a picture, explain the process, what tools I use, and we'll try some different photos this next time and really change up how, I'll show you how I change up my editing style depending on the picture. Thanks for watching.